This is Catherine Neal, and this is PowerPoint 1, Defining Ethics. During this lecture, we're going to begin thinking about what ethics means. What does it mean to be ethical? How do we make decisions between right and wrong? Why is it important for us to think about these things, to consider becoming an ethical decision maker? And how do we become an ethical decision maker? So, as we think about ethics, you might be thinking, why am I in this class? Why is this a required class in a business curriculum? In the early 2000s in the United States, there was a huge wave of corporate scandals. The biggest bankruptcies in the history of this country. Company names that you might recognize like Enron and WorldCom, the accounting firm Arthur Andersen, Global Crossing. There were these huge scandals that shook the economy and the confidence of the public. They were so large and the frauds were so egregious that people were angry and concerned. So there began to be pressure on business schools to graduate individuals who had ethics training so that future leaders in the business environment would hopefully be better, more ethical decision makers. So classes like this, like our Business 330 class, began to be developed and required at business schools across the United States, and they still are to this day. Business organizations, business leaders find it very important that individuals working in their organizations are aware of the importance of being an ethical professional and have the ability to identify ethical dilemmas and to deal with them appropriately on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why this course is included in the curriculum here and why you're sitting here today. Hopefully you'll find it, beyond just being a required course, something that is of great practical use for you, of importance, of relevance, of interest. During this course, I want you to really be self-reflective and introspective, to think about how you personally make decisions between right and wrong. How do you know if something's right or wrong? What influences your decision making? Do you use some type of framework or process to think your way through a difficult situation? A couple of questions that I want you to consider as you become self-reflective. First one, describe one thing you did at work during the past year that really bothers you. Think about it. Something that continues to bother you, that you think maybe you didn't do the right thing or you didn't have a good outcome. And think, why does it bother you? Why does it stick with you? And secondly, describe one thing you did in your personal life during the past year that really bothers you. And think about it. Why does it continue to bother you? Our goal of studying ethics in this course is not for me to give you reading assignments or lists of good behaviors and bad behaviors, but rather for you to become a better critical thinker, a better decision maker, so that when you are faced with a difficult ethical dilemma, a difficult situation, you are able to think through that situation, think about the impact, the costs, and the consequences of your choices and of your actions, and for you to become an accountable decision maker. And so you begin making decisions based on clear, disciplined, informed evaluation. so that you're not just reacting emotionally, you don't have knee-jerk reactions to a situation, but that you work your way through the difficulty in a clear, disciplined, orderly way so that you end up with a better outcome. So, how do we become ethical decision makers? Number one, try to avoid feeling superior to those who've made bad decisions. Throughout this course, we're going to be using a lot of case studies. Course is based on the case study method, which means we're going to read and talk about things that people have done in the past, analyze their decision making, their actions, and the consequences of their actions, so that we don't make the same bad decisions. If they made bad decisions that had bad outcomes, or if they had made good decisions and had good outcomes, how can we emulate that type of behavior? So it's easy sometimes when we look at these cases and we see people who've made bad decisions to think, I would never make that bad decision. I'm a better person than that. I would never do something that stupid or poorly considered. And what I want you to do is try not to think about that. Try not to think that it could just never happen to you, because I promise you, all of the people that we're going to talk about who made bad decisions, some of them so serious that they ended up in prison, serving lengthy prison sentences. They never thought they were capable of making bad decisions either. They never thought that they were unethical people. They never thought that they were bad people. So instead of thinking it could never happen to you, I would rather you try to spend your time analyzing the flaws in their analysis and reasoning processes. Look at what they did. What went wrong? Also, take a look at the pressure that these individuals were under at the time when they made the bad decisions. Pressure can cause people to make bad decisions. Time pressure, performance pressure. So really look at the situations they were in and try to accurately analyze what went wrong. Other ethical traps and pitfalls: making decisions based on emotions, making decisions based on desires, and as I mentioned, making decisions based on pressure. So how can we become better ethical decision makers? Well, here's a list of ways that can happen. Practice, as in all things. Practice making good decisions. Use and rely on a decision-making framework, which we will be talking about and applying throughout the next several weeks. Character development. Informed analysis. Disciplined evaluation. Self-awareness. And critical thinking. So keep these things in mind as skills that you want to develop as we go throughout the course. So let's think about defining ethics. What does being ethical mean to you? When you think about yourself and how you've developed values and principles in your own life, I want you to really start thinking about who you are and how you make decisions. So here are some suggestions for how to start that process. Create these 3 lists. Number 1, who are you? List the qualities you'll always have no matter what happens to you financially, professionally, or personally. So if your circumstances were to change dramatically, like for example, you won the Powerball and you had $200 million more than you have today, what qualities that do you possess that would remain stable, that would be steady, that are at the core of who you are. If you're an honest person today, would you continue to be an honest person if you had lots of money? Or if you're a generous person, would you continue to be generous? Think about the opposite change in circumstance. If you suddenly had no resources, no job, no money, what about you would remain the same? If your life was very difficult, what qualities would remain the same? So give that some thought. Think about who you really are at your core, the things about you that will never change. The second list I want you to think about is a list of the things you would never do to be successful. Are there lines you would never cross? Would you lie to be successful, to meet a goal? Would you take credit for someone else's work? So give that some thought. What are you willing to do to be successful, and what things would you never do to be successful? And finally, I want you to think about how you want to be remembered. How do you want to be remembered at the end of your life? Do you want to be known as someone who was very financially successful? Do you want to be remembered as someone who was devoted to friends and family? As someone who cared about causes like the environment or animals or human rights? Do you want to be remembered for someone who contributed to their community significantly? So think about how you want to be remembered and what you need to do throughout your life to get to that point. Ben Franklin, who you may remember from your American history classes, was so serious about character development, about recognizing who he wanted to be, that every day he evaluated his performance in practicing 13 virtues. And you can see on the screen the 13 virtues that he evaluated himself on and how he defined those. I just think it's interesting to think about. Do we do enough self-reflective exercises, and are we introspective enough to really recognize whether we're becoming and living as the person that we want to be? So throughout this course, try to consciously think about who you think you are, who you want to be, and whether or not that's how you're living and that's how you're making decisions on a day-to-day basis. If you're interested, there's a clip from a musical called Frankly Ben. There's a song devoted to these 13 virtues. If you're a fan of musical theater, that clip's available to you there. So a couple of formal definitions of ethics. Inquiry into the nature and grounds of morality, where the term morality is taken to mean moral judgments, standards, and rules of conduct. And a second formal definition, the study of the general nature of morals and of specific moral choices, moral philosophy, and the rules or standards governing the conduct of members of a profession. For many individuals, once you are out and part of your professional career, there will be rules and standards that you're required to comply with, whether it be as a member of a profession, like if you're an accountant, there are ethical rules that you're required to comply with in the performance of your duties. Many organizations have codes of conduct, principles that have been adopted, and the members of the organization are expected to comply with those codes of conduct. And sometimes there are no rules that govern what you should do in a difficult ethical dilemma. And hopefully the tools that you'll develop throughout this course will help you in those situations when you have to make the decision about what's right or wrong. So what are ethics? Something I want you to really grasp and make clear in your mind. Often, especially in business, the default when it comes to what should we do, what's the right thing to do, is what does the law require of us? Ethics is not the same as legal standards. So doing just what is legally required does not necessarily mean you've met your ethical obligation in a given situation. Unethical conduct may or may not be legal. You could do something completely legal, but that is unethical. Vice versa, you could do something that you believe to be ethical, but that's illegal. So can you think of examples of behavior that may be illegal but ethical? Let's say your friend is pregnant and about to have a baby and asks you to drive her to the hospital. It's an emergency. So you drive faster than the speed limit. You're breaking the law. Does that seem like the wrong thing to do or the right thing to do under the circumstances? Can you think of behavior that's legal but unethical? And in the United States, there are several big issues that there are divided opinions about, strong opinions about, of behavior that is perfectly legal but that many people consider unethical. Some of those are capital punishment, euthanasia, assisted suicide. In some states, assisted suicide is legal, but there are people who consider that to be unethical. And a big one that is discussed frequently is abortion. Abortion is legal in this country, but there are more than a few people who believe it to be unethical. So do not in your mind equate ethics with legal compliance, because they're not the same thing. Just because you're legally compliant does not mean you've met your ethical obligation. So when we think about and try to understand what ethics mean to us, for me, I often think about it being the difference between right and wrong, how you decide between right and wrong. Often ethics are referred to as normative standards. What do we think is normal behavior in a situation? What do we expect of each other under the circumstances? Certain standards and expectations for behavior. For example, you would dress differently for a job interview than you do to go shopping at Target. If you dress too casually for a job interview, people will notice. If you're dressed very formally at Target, people will notice. So we have certain expectations of each other under their circumstances, and if people vary from those expectations, we notice. We all live every day complying with unwritten rules for behavior. How we dress, what we do. Do you have your cell phone on silent when you're in a meeting so that it doesn't interrupt other people? Even though there's no written rule that requires you to do that, you do it because it seems like the right thing to do. Think about when you get in an elevator. Which way do you face? Most people who get in an elevator get in and they face the doors. Even though there's no requirement that you do that, you do it because it's the expectation. And if you do something different, everyone in the elevator will notice. Other examples of unwritten rules that we comply with is when someone cuts in line in front of you at the grocery store. It seems unfair. And even though we all know that life is not fair, we expect it to be. We don't like when someone treats us unfairly or treats someone else unfairly. So if someone cuts in line in front of you, that's not illegal. No one's breaking a law. There's likely no written rule that says you must wait at the end of the line. But it's a breach of expected behavior. It's the violation of a norm in our orderly society. So what are ethics? Standards and norms for behavior that are beyond laws and legal rights. Ethics bring self-restraint and self-discipline, and it simply means doing the right thing. I want you to think about the most ethical person you know. Think of a real person, your grandparent, your friend, a teacher, someone you respect in a position of authority. List that person's character traits. What makes you believe them to be an ethical person? For most people, you'll describe that person as honest, maybe caring, compassionate, thoughtful, fair. Think of the list, think of your person, and come up with the list that actually describes that person. Now, I want you to consider this scenario. Your grandmother's on her deathbed. She looks at you and asks as her last dying wish that you follow her religious beliefs devoutly after she dies. Assume that you do not plan to do this. Should you tell her that you'll do as she asks so that she'll die a more peaceful death? Or are you honest with her and tell her that you have no intention of fulfilling her request? What's the right thing to do there? You could be completely honest. You know you're not going to follow her religious beliefs. Do you tell her that and disappoint her in your last conversation with her? Is that the right thing to do? Or do you think being compassionate in this situation is more important than being honest? Which of those good character traits takes priority here? Because maybe you can't be all of those good things at the same time. How do you know what's the right thing to do? And this is what we're going to examine throughout this course. Often, we'll see the right answer easily, the good or right thing to do, or the bad or wrong thing to do. Where we're going to live is in the gray area, where we're going to make those hard decisions when it's not clear what's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. We can't be everything that we want to be at the same time. How do we make those decisions? And we're going to develop some tools and practice in becoming better decision makers when the answers aren't clear. I want you to take a minute and think about the trolley problem. I'm going to play this short video that gives you an overview of the trolley problem, which is a thought problem that was developed by a philosopher and that helps us begin the process of making an ethical decision in a tough situation.
A runaway train is heading towards 5 workers on a railway line. There's no way of warning them, but you're standing near a lever that operates some points. Switch the points, and the train goes down a spur. Trouble is, there's another worker on that bit of track too, but it's 1 fatality instead of 5. Should you do that? Many people think the right thing to do would be to switch the points, to sacrifice 1 to save 5, since that produces the best outcome possible. Now imagine the train heading for the workers again. This time it can only be stopped by pushing a very large man off a bridge. His great bulk would stop the train, but he'd die. Should you do that? Most people say no. But why not? Both thought experiments are cases of sacrificing 1 to save 5. What the trolley problem examines is whether moral decisions are simply about outcomes or about the manner in which you achieve them. Some utilitarians argue that the 2 cases are not importantly different from each other. Both have similar consequences, and consequences are all that really matter. In each case, 1 person dies and 5 are saved, the best option in each harrowing situation. But lots of people say they would switch the points, but they wouldn't push the man off the bridge. Are they simply inconsistent, or are they onto something?
So I want you to give that some thought. What's the right thing to do? Do you make the decision to save 5 people at the expense of 1? Or do you not intervene in that situation? What's the right thing to do? There's a link to an article by Judith Jarvis Thompson. It was published in the Yale Law Journal. I want you to read that article, give this some deeper thought. And here's a quick video to end with some more thoughts about the trolley problem.
This is an exciting day. We are going to tackle the trolley problem.
Is this a game? I go first. I call blue.
This is a thought experiment first introduced by British philosopher Philippa Foot in 1967. You are driving a trolley when the brakes fail, and on the track ahead of you are 5 workmen that you will run over. Now, you can steer to another track, but on that track is 1 person you would kill instead of the 5. What do you do?
Do we know anything about the people? Like, is one of them an ex-boyfriend? Or that snooty girl from Rite Aid who was always silently judging my purchases? It's like, yeah, chickie, a baby Ruth and birth control. I see the irony. Keep a swiping.
You don't know any of the workers.
Okay, well then that's easy. I switch tracks. Kill 1 person instead of 5.
But this is hard, because the only trolley I've ever been on is James Franco's ironic trolley. It travels backwards from his penguin grotto to his garage of adult tricycles. And kill 1, say 5.
Good, but there's a lot of other versions of this. Like, what if you knew one of the people? Does that change the equation? Or what if you're not the driver, you're just a bystander? Or let's throw the trolley out altogether. Let's say you're a doctor and you can save 5 patients, but you have to kill 1 healthy person and use his organs to do it.
But that's not the same thing.
Why not? It's still choosing to kill 1 person to save 5, isn't it? Michael, you've been kind of quiet. What do you think about all this?
Well, obviously the dilemma is clear. How do you kill all 6 people? So I would dangle a sharp blade out the window to slice the neck of the guy on the other track as we smush our 5 main guys. Oh, I did the thing again, didn't I?
Yeah, 10 more, buddy.
People good. People good. Why is that so hard to remember? People... What is it?
Good?
Good.
So give some thought to the trolley problem, and we'll think about that until we get together again. Thanks.